will put the effective tax rates in the broader context of how will this affect our reputation and what are the financial implications, yes? So those are some of the broad implications, I think, that come out of this tax debate. As I said, it's not going to go away. You need to engage, and when I say you, that means all of us, in government, in the academic community, and businesses, because we need to try to make a serious effort, in fact, to have an informed debate. And if governments are not happy with the outcomes from the existing tax rules, then they need to change the rules themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that introduction, and that sets the tone for this topic on tax and fairness. Mr. Parasan, you have a difficult and an onerous job to defend the actions of tax administration if they take questioning the morality of the taxpayer. What has been your experiences in the Indian context, without, of course, reference to any cases?
In my view, this issue of morality has actually emerged in recent times, even though actually the concept of morality or ethics have been debated in the past, but in view of changing values and culture, and particularly due to aggressive electronic media and the print media, which have gone against, I would say, high-bracketed taxpayers, along with NGOs, this concept of morality has particularly picked up in the West, in the UK, and in the US. And that's why we have seen many of these companies, Starbucks. In fact, last week, I was told the CEO of Sainsbury had made an open challenge that leaders of the industry have to stand up and reveal their tax practices, arguing that tax is a moral issue for British companies. And so far, I think this issue has not caught up in India like what is happening in the West. But I'm sure, I think it's also going to catch up in India quite shortly. But the danger in India is, I think, it will be quite unguided. And there will be too many elements in India, including courts, PILs, etc. Already there is a criticism that the legislature has overstepped on many occasions. In fact, I would like to remind, as far as the courts are concerned, they are not concerned about morality. They are only concerned about interpreting law as it is. And only when there is an ambiguity in law, judges tend to actually tilt towards probably ethics or morality. And in fact, in one of the celebrated cases, in Gregory vs. Helvering, Justice Hand had observed, anyone may so arrange his affairs that his taxes shall be as low as possible, and he is not bound to choose that pattern which will best pay the treasury. There is not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. And Lord Denning, in his own characteristic way, had pointed out that I am disposed of to rather agree with the view taken by Lord Denning, where he famously remarked that tax avoidance may be lawful, but yet it is not a virtue. Therefore, I think these are all evolving concepts. Previously, I think we are only talking about actually form versus substance, aggressive tax planning, and strategic tax planning, etc. But now we are getting into these moral issues, and this will be quite significant, and it will be debated in the years to come.
Sure. I think it's important as we go through the debate to make a distinction between not liking the outcome from applying the existing rules and seeing those as unfair, whether it's the transfer pricing rules and treaties, and looking at aggressive tax planning, because the aggressive tax planning may in fact take place whatever the rules are. Yes, so I think it's an important distinction to make, as we go through the panel. Yes,
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that brings us, Mr. Datar, you have been representing clients defending tax planning. Do you actually, as a practicing advocate in the Supreme Court, get into this issue of morality? I mean, in the sense, what if a particular taxpayer's tax planning hits to you in your heart? Do you question yourself, is this morally correct or not?
Well, when I saw this topic, morality or legality, it's as if these are contradictory terms. I can have a perfectly legal scheme. Am I still immoral? That's the question mark. And I saw a wonderful article by David Goldberg in the British Tax Review. What is morality in taxation? He says that morality in taxation is paying more taxes than you actually have to. That is the definition of morality. And I've been reading this debate about Starbucks, about Apple, and so on. And I find there's a sense of hypocrisy in the whole debate. Because when it comes to my personal taxes as a lawyer, I can take advantage of all the schemes the government offers. It's perfectly fine. But when a corporation does it, then it's something evil, something to be demonized, which I find it's not correct. Secondly, I also want to ask one question. You asked me the question, do I feel it's immoral? I said no. You talk of Starbucks, you talk of Apple, you talk of Google, and you only focus on the direct taxes they don't pay. How many of us consider what is the employment generated by this corporation? What are the indirect taxes they pay into the system? What is the wealth they create for the nation or for the international community? And what is the total tax revenue they generate, and not just focus on the direct taxes? So if you take, for example, suppose you have Starbucks in India, and they have, say, let's say 500 outlets. They're going to pay VAT, they're going to pay service tax, they're going to pay municipal taxes, they're going to pay so many taxes. And if the Indian tax system enables them to pay zero taxes, so be it. That's the point. Secondly, in all these articles I've read, we keep on talking of the morality of the taxpayer. I thought to myself, is there anything called the morality of the legislature? We keep on hammering at the individual, at the corporation. Is making a retrospective law immoral? Is repeatedly overruling your judiciary immoral? Is reneging on your promise immoral? Take, for example, Mukesh asked me about my clients. I set up a unit in the SEZ on the ground that I'll have a 10-year tax holiday. All my rents are securitized to the banks so that all the rents go to the banks over 9 years, and after 9 years, the entire building is mine, and then I make my money. 3 years down the line, you say I'll impose 18% MAT. So 2.5 months rent goes to pay the interest. What happens to the SSE? Complete turmoil. Now, can we not think of morality on the part of the legislature? Then morality on the part of the executive. Administering the laws fairly. Not making wrong demands just because you have some targets to meet, and leave the poor taxpayer to the wolves, so to speak, and he has to litigate up to the Supreme Court. So just as there is morality on the part of the taxpayer, there is morality on the part of the legislature, there is morality on the part of the executive, and I would say morality on the part of the judiciary as well, not to bring in your personal predilections in deciding cases and go strictly by the law. And Mohan just quoted Learned Hand, and one of my favorite judges, and I'll just read his quote. Nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the demands of law. Taxes are enforced exactions, not voluntary contributions. To demand more in the name of morals is mere cant. And if you ask me, in my view, in this debate, there can be one and only one commandment: thou shalt not adopt a colorable device. Beyond that, there is no obligation on the part of any SSE. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Datar. May I now move on to the next model, which is what is the judiciary approach and the role and the attitude of the courts, and do actually courts look into morality in reaching judgments? Mr. Pramod Kumar, you have presided over many judgments in relation to aggressive tax planning. Would you like to introduce the topic?
Thank you, Mukesh. It's a very humbling moment because in the presence of someone as eminent as Justice Kapadia, I have to speak about how judicial calls are taken on this issue. And Mr. Parasan is there. Please forgive me for speaking out of turn on this. Now, as Mr. Parasan has observed, and I quite agree with him, that courts are not really concerned about morality unless there's an element of ambiguity in this. And it's only when there's an ambiguity that the questions of ethical and morality are brought in. Now, the question of morality in interpretation of tax laws, it does indeed appear, may not really bother judicial officers unless, and that's a very big unless such moral principles are implicit in the scheme of legal or contractual provisions that they are required to deal with this. I'll deal with this rider a little later. But the broad principle of judicial officers being somewhat indifferent to the issues of morality could be twofold. First, judicial officers are required to be neutral, not only vis-a-vis the parties before them, but they are also required to be neutral vis-a-vis somewhat competing set of values. And these moral issues are not only with respect to the taxpayer, but as Mr. Datar, very eminent advocate, very rightly said, these are also vis-a-vis the tax administration, government, and legislature. As he pointed out, the question of retrospective legislation is one of them. But then why only this aspect? There are moral issues with regard to the taxability as a whole. It's a coercive recovery, and it's a recovery which is done by politicians and done through the administration. Politicians take this money and put it to the use as per their priorities. And administration also in turn claims credit for recovering this money, and at least in India, I'm sure Akhilesh will agree, that sometimes the facilities they get is linked to the collections they have made. So there can't be anything moral about it. Now, if you get into such vague areas, it is indeed difficult. And as unelected judges, the duty of the judicial officers is to implement the will of the legislature, and when such moral values are not reflected in the law, it is perhaps beyond the call of their duty to fill in that vacuum, even if they see it as a vacuum. Secondly, there cannot be, and there has never been, any consensus on what is morally right. And as a result, the exercise of putting in moral values would result in more uncertainty and more inconsistency. And I'm sure this is something very detrimental to the conduct of business, particularly in the modern age, large businesses, where people who come and do business with you are not really attuned to and conversant with your culture, which increases tax certainty. But let me turn to the rider now. The rider is that in the Indian judicial system, this doctrine of substance over form is very well established. The controversy, if there is any at all, is only on the question that at what point of time you have to look at substance over form. Is it the point of time when commercial, when the tax reasons outweigh the commercial reasons, or is it the point of time when there's no commercial reason at all?